I'm Danny Gasparini, and welcome to this segment of Penn Voice. I am joined by someone I admire wholeheartedly, Bonnie Addario, who is the founder of the Addario Lung Cancer Foundation and also the Addario Lung Cancer Medical Institute. Bonnie, welcome.
Thank you.
I feel like we're in our living room.
I know.
Other than we would never decorate our living room like this.
Well.
But anyway, I'm so excited to have you here because you're going to be releasing some exciting news that you've been a part of. But before we do that, I want to make sure that our viewers know your story. You're a 14-year lung cancer survivor.
Correct.
There are few and far of those individuals. So tell us your story. How were you diagnosed and how'd you get here?
Well, I was diagnosed, like sadly, most people continue to be diagnosed very late in the process. I had a tumor for over a year and was misdiagnosed for a long time. Luckily, I took matters into my own hands after I was told by quite a few physicians there was nothing wrong with me.
So you had a cough, you had a pain in your shoulder.
I was losing weight, you know, all of the signs that point to something being wrong. And so I went and paid for a full body scan on my own, and the radiologist came out afterwards, and he pointed to a place on the scan, and it was actually my aorta. And he said, Bonnie, take this to your physician today. Leave here, go straight to your physician and show him this scan. I did, and that was the onset of, you know, even more difficulty getting an exact diagnosis so I could start treatment.
So what did become your diagnosis, and what did the first physician say to you after the diagnosis?
My diagnosis was stage 3B lung cancer. That's just an inch away from stage 4. And I was told it was inoperable. There was nothing anybody can do because of the place it was in my heart. And I didn't take that for an answer, not once, twice, 3 times. And finally found an amazing physician that was actually coming down from UCSF and teaching thoracic surgery at a local hospital on the peninsula, Sequoia Hospital. I was on the foundation board at the time, so I made a few calls that day when I read this article in the newspaper about this surgeon, and I said, I've got to meet him. I just absolutely have to meet him. So that was all arranged for, and I met him. He saw all my scans. He looked at everything, and he said, Bonnie, what do you want? What do you want from me? What do you want me to do? And I said, David, if I'm going to die from this disease, I don't want it to be because I did nothing. So he looked at me and he said, okay, let's see if we can't put a plan together. So they wrestled up a tumor board, which consisted of an oncologist, a radiation oncologist, a pulmonologist, a surgeon, and a couple of other people thrown in. And I just had the most dynamic team in my corner. I had a lot of chemotherapy and a lot of radiation prior to, and the goal was if they could shrink this tumor enough away from my heart, they would go in and operate. And on St. Patrick's Day, surgery day, when they had arranged to do the surgery because the tumor had shrunk enough, that's the reason I'm here today.
So again, we look back 14 years. That diagnosis 14 years ago is a very different diagnosis today, because so much has happened in the world of lung cancer, and we're going to get to that in a minute. But again,
it's not that different, though.
You had to go 3 places or 3 different physicians because everyone kept coming up with get your affairs in order.
Yeah.
And you had decided that doing nothing was not going to be an option, so you were going to do something. Well, you did do something. I think as soon as you came off of that operating table with that physician, Dr. David Jablons, and you started the Addario Lung Cancer Foundation. So what's been your goal? What drove you to not just survive lung cancer or to get well and to try and get life back to normal, to starting a foundation that is now global?
You know, like most people, I think when I was diagnosed with lung cancer, I didn't realize that cancer wasn't just cancer. that all cancers weren't the same. I found out in very short order that cancers are different and they're treated differently. And when I started doing some research about lung cancer, I found a serious injustice about lung cancer and the research funding and the treatment and everything, and that the survival rate at the time I was diagnosed was, I think, about 13%. And today it's just 20%. It's just still
at stage
not okay.
4, right?
Still not okay. So I made a commitment to myself when I was in the Barca Lounge, having infusion, having chemotherapy, that if I made it through the knothole, I would do something to change the survival rate of lung cancer and go after that injustice.
So with the Addario Lung Cancer Foundation, you decided to take on that challenge of changing the survival rate in 3 different areas. 1, funding research to change how people are diagnosed.
Right.
The drugs and the processes available to someone once they are diagnosed. Programs for patients. So how do you inform and educate patients while they're living through this diagnosis and this disease? And 2, which I think is the most important to me, and that is awareness and outreach. When I first met you, thought that lung cancer was related to cigarette smoking. And boy, did I learn something through your awareness program that anyone can get lung cancer. What do you think has been your most important focus with the Addario Lung Cancer Foundation?
To your point, Danny, awareness is always our most important focus, because we're not going to get anywhere that we need to be without the whole world understanding that anyone can get lung cancer, and we have to stop this injustice that's been happening.
The stigma.
And the stigma. But, we have some amazing patient programs. For instance, we have one called The Living Room. And I was invited a while back, or years ago now, to speak at a major academic center in their support group. And I walked in there, and there was a little gray room with no windows, gray folding table, gray folding chairs, and honestly, gray people. And I thought, you know what? I looked around and I thought, there's no one here that's living. There's no hope in this room. So I left there and I went back to work, and I told the team, you're going to kill me like we don't have enough to do. We're going to start a support group, which has culminated into an educational program and support for patients. We bring in a key opinion leader to talk and live stream to patients all over the world all of the specifics about lung cancer, specific treatments, early detection. We talk about every single issue surrounded in lung cancer. We've reached 145 countries. And I want to stress that because, we have to really make every dollar we earn stretch.
Right.
When we realized that everybody needed to know the things that our support group was hearing, and in our support group called The Living Room, a little double entendre there on what I saw in the early living room, the early support group. We thought, how can we get this word out to more people? And I don't know if this is okay, but I have to put in a plug for Penn TV because you were in that room that night, and we all said, how can we replicate this? How can we get this on every corner in the U.S. and hopefully the world? And, there wasn't enough money to even start doing something like that. So we started live streaming it through Peninsula TV. We've reached 145 countries. And patients dial in. They can interact while the key opinion leader is speaking. They can talk about what they're learning. And we're also putting it on FaceTime Live now. So we're reaching millions of people. So awareness is still huge, still huge. We just got approval for early detection a little over a year ago for lung cancer. But here comes that injustice sneaking back in the door, because only smokers qualify for early detection for lung cancer. And the ridiculous part of all that is that 70% of newly diagnosed lung cancer patients either never smoked or quit smoking decades ago. So.
And I think we also have this visual of the individual that was diagnosed with lung cancer is a 70-year-old male smoker. Right. So, and there are so many stories that we can talk about. And if they jump on the Addario Lung Cancer Foundation website, they can read about Jill Costello. They can read about Emily Bennett Taylor. They can read about so many young individuals under the age of 40 diagnosed with lung cancer, never smokers, athletes, right? So this disease really has something more to learn, and you've been trying to get at the bottom of this injustice for so very long.
Right.
You spoke earlier and corrected me when I said there have been so many breakthroughs since the time that you were diagnosed to 14 years later. And you said, not really. Now, do you mean that in comparison to other cancers and other diagnoses and the survivability of other cancers? Tell us about how you believe we haven't come that far and how far do we need to go?
A great example is the fact that more new therapies have been diagnosed for lung cancer in the last 2 years than the last 5 decades.
Got it.
Okay. In 1971, Richard Nixon declared war on cancer. Lung cancer never got involved in that war, was never invited to be in the war. And the war is happening now. It's starting.
Okay.
But we have a long way to go. You know, that war took place in 1971, and that was decades and decades ago. So we're a little behind the curve. So a lot more work has to happen. But that work isn't going to happen without funding.
Right.
For every $14,000 that goes to a person that dies of breast cancer, only $2,000 goes to lung.
Right.
And more people actually die from lung cancer. More women and men die from lung cancer than any other cancer in the world.
Right. And one of the lowest survival rates.
Right.
So I want to then talk about, you had a challenge, and that is, as a foundation headquartered here in San Carlos, California, we know globally now, as you have viewers, and you also have research centers in France and in Italy and in Spain, and physicians working all over the world, Japan, on some of the research that you're funding.
Right.
So, but you decided to take it even further. You have some big news, and we would like to break that big news here on Penn Voice.
Okay. Well, you know, it's very interesting because, you know, the funding is so out of sync with some of the other larger cancers. And by the way, the CDC has said that tobacco affects all organs in the body, not just the lung. So people have to keep that in mind.
And we have to keep saying it.
And we have to keep saying it over and over and over again, because some physicians are still not, you know, saying that. That's not their message. Because the funding for lung cancer is so fractured, and there are quite a few lovely people in the United States that have small, you know, little foundations that, you know, maybe they don't raise more than $100,000 or $200,000 a year, some even less. There's a person that I've been friends with for decades on the East Coast in Washington, D.C. They do a lot of work on politics and policy and those things that are also direly needed for lung cancer. And they work on early detection, and they have about 600 screening centers now in the United States, and they're working on making those even better and more useful on a daily basis, and getting the word out about early detection. So that person's name is Lori Fenton, and that company is called the Lung Cancer Alliance. Well, Lori and I have been friends, like I just said, for decades. When I'm on the East Coast, I always go and see her. She does the same when she's on the West Coast. And every year for the last 10 years, I think, we've said to each other, you know, someday we really need to merge, because we need to get more done. And, you know, we're fractured. So every year we said, yes, but not yet. Well, a year ago we met and said, yeah, now's the time. So it took us over a year to merge the two entities, the Lung Cancer Alliance and the Addario Lung Cancer Foundation. And we brought in a consultant to help us get through, you know, all of, you know, merging with a not-for-profit is no different than merging a for-profit. You have to go through all the same somersaults and financials and legal and all of those things. Well, the good news is we launched on the 8th of this month, and we have a new name. It's called the GO2Foundation for Lung Cancer. And the symbol GO2, a big capital G, capital O, and then a small infracted 2, and O2 is the symbol for oxygen. And all lung cancer patients need a lot of oxygen.
So we're very excited because we've started the program off learning about you and how you started the Addario Lung Cancer Foundation. Again, fast forward 14 years, you're now merged with Lung Cancer Alliance, and you are now the GO2Foundation for lung cancer.
Right.
So what is the future? What do you, as the GO2Foundation, now see is the future of this organization? What are the two organizations now going to focus on?
Together, we're going to knock down every barrier to access that every lung cancer patient has in the U.S. and globally. There are still, because of the stigma and because of some of the injustice, there's still quite a few barriers out there. 80% of all cancer patients are treated in the community system. And sometimes it's very difficult for one oncologist to know about absolutely every cancer possibly.
Right.
And we always tell patients, always find somebody that's an expert in your cancer, regardless of what kind of cancer that is. But our goal is to do more early detection, get those screening centers up. We also have a program called Community Centers of Excellence. So we're finding those community centers that have tumor boards, they have multidisciplinary care, they also have screening, they have everything that the patient could possibly need in one place.
Right.
They don't have to fly out for a clinical trial. They can get that clinical trial work done close to home. We have to bring those trials to the patient rather than making the patient have to travel to the clinical trials, because sometimes a clinical trial is the best first-line treatment for a patient.
So at the end of the day, and you're going to now look forward 25 years for GO2Foundation for lung cancer, what does lung cancer look like?
Lung cancer is going to be in the 80-90 percentile, right up there with the other big cancers.
And you've already informed us that early detection is going to be your key for
Early detection is going to be a big part of that survival rate, but not the only thing, because we're working on really chronically managed first.
Right.
And everybody, I think, can identify with chronically managed. You look at diabetes, you look at
heart disease,
AIDS, and heart disease, and all of those things. You know, that's what we need first. And so we need therapies.
Right.
We need research. We need studies to create those therapies.
Now, let me ask you for your last question, a question that you asked a room full of scientists. Again, 15 years ago when the Addario Lung Cancer Medical Institute was formed. So now I'm going to ask you, if money were no object, what would you do today as the GO2Foundation for lung cancer?
I would throw millions of dollars at awareness. We would have our foundation on Good Morning America, the Today Show, Dr. Oz, everybody that we could buy our way into.
The cover of Time magazine.
Right. We've tried to get in without paying, and get rid of this belief that lung cancer patients brought this disease on themselves, and that somehow people feel that they deserve to die from this disease. They don't deserve the treatment that other people with other cancers are getting.
And they deserve more.
And they deserve to live.
Right.
Just like anybody else.
Well, you start here on Penn Voice, so let's hope that this show on Penn Voice sparks someone's view somewhere.
Absolutely.
And says, I'm the producer for the Ellen DeGeneres show, or I'm the producer of the Dr. Oz show. And we're going to have Bonnie and Lori come and talk about how we change the face of lung cancer.
And some patients as well that are out there in that fight. We can bring a patient that was diagnosed while she was pregnant. We can bring a patient that harvested her ovaries when she was 28 years old, and she made the cut and she survived lung cancer, and now she has two little twin girls,
Right.
2 years old. Yeah, we'll show people what lung cancer really looks like.
Well, thank you, Bonnie, for your fight, for your amazing 14 years, for the next 20 years for the GO2Foundation. And let's hope that you and I are still doing this 20 years from now, and I can bring you back on Penn Voice, and you can make the announcement to the world that we have a cure, or we are living quite comfortably as a chronically managed disease.
You got it. And it'll be sooner than you think.
All right. Well, I'm
Okay.
going to hold you to that.
Okay. Thank you, Danny.
And thank you, Bonnie, always for what you do and all that you do for millions and millions of people throughout this globe who've been diagnosed with this disease.
And thank you to Penn TV. I have to say that because this is not my first time on Penn TV. My story is much better now than it was, a few years ago. And they come into our office for our living room show once a month, and they do an amazing job, absolutely amazing. They turn this studio into another studio in our offices.
Well, and once again, as this program is typically a 10-minute segment, you and I have within seconds turned it into a 20-minute program.
There you go. Awesome.
So thanks again to all of you.
Lung cancer deserves that.
Lung cancer does deserve every minute of it and more. And we'll see all of you next time on Penn Voice.